Human trafficking. Human trafficking is defined as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force of other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position at vulnerability, or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person. Exploitation shall include, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution of others or of other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Human trafficking is the most prevalent form of slavery in the United States. An estimated 35.8 billion people are currently enslaved globally, and that more than 800,000 people are trafficked across international borders each year. Worldwide, 2 million children and young women are trapped in sex slavery.
One of the first steps is often an interview with the victim in a room like this. On the other side of the glass, there are detectives, lawyers, child welfare, and case coordinators like Beth Bouchard.
How do kids end up in these situations?
When most people hear about human trafficking, they think that this is a problem that happens in other places, in other countries, and they have sort of that image of maybe a woman in chains, maybe somebody tied to a radiator. They might think sometimes the images in media will be portrayed as all white, so maybe the victims are all white females. And in reality, we see that kids, well, certainly some of our kids are held physically against their will. The majority of the kids that we see have sort of these invisible trauma bonds with their exploiter. And particularly for our commercial sexual exploitation cases, the dynamics of that abuse are very complicated, and they almost mirror domestic violence. I think we had a case a couple years ago with a youth who was recovered in a hotel in a sting with law enforcement, and she'd been exploited for multiple months. And she had talked about how her exploiter, she almost saw him as someone helping her and saving her, even though he was facilitating her sexual abuse every night. So you can see how, for especially a child, a youth in that situation, it can be very confusing.
Of the cases of exploitation that Beth and her colleagues work on, about 2/3 are kids of color, and more than 3 in 4 have a history of child abuse.
Because of the traumatic experiences that victims of human trafficking encounter, the needs of victims are extensive and require the services of several providers, including healthcare providers, for victims to transform into survivors. So how does occupational therapy incorporate into human trafficking? Occupational therapy has the capacity of having a profound role in both providing client-centered care services to victims and survivors of human trafficking and partaking in preventative advocacy efforts to combat human trafficking. Occupational therapy has the potential to have a profound effect in addressing various needs of victims. In the article, Role of Occupational Therapy in Combating Human Trafficking, occupational therapy practitioners offer client-centered intervention that emphasizes the value of active engagement in healthy occupations that leads to positive change in occupational performance skills and patterns to promote wellness, role competence, satisfaction, and improve quality of life. Active participation in meaningful occupations offers a distraction from negative patterns of thinking and promotes feelings of confidence and control while learning new skills. Human trafficking is a global issue negatively affecting the lives of people of various ages, genders, cultures, races, and social economic status. Occupational therapists can help advocate for human trafficking and provide treatment to victims and survivors of human trafficking.